We now welcome on a very special guest. It is SEC Network host, University of Oklahoma alum, Union High School alum, a Union Red Hawk who just beat the Jinx Trojans the other day. I told Dari I'd mention that. It is Dari Nowkhah. Dari, thank you for joining us on the show. Appreciate it, man.
Hey guys, good to be with you, man. Good to see the the Oklahoma on your shirt. Mark's got the OU rocking. So I thought about wearing some OU gear, but I didn't. I just got back from a little run and threw on whatever I could that was dry. So I apologize.
Don't worry about it. You look great. So we want, like you said, OU alum. What are your thoughts? We're 2 weeks into the Brent Venables era, and they look good. They're 2-0. Got Nebraska coming up this week. What do you think you've seen out of OU so far this season?
I'll tell you, my favorite thing isn't what I've seen, it's what he said. And that is, we're not going to use our offense as an excuse for our defense. Our defense's job is to stop people regardless of what our offense does. And that to me is my favorite thing, because there's no question with Lincoln, with Mike Stoops, really with whoever at any point ran our defense, it seemed to be, and maybe they didn't say it, but they certainly didn't say what he said. And to hear him say what he said was a relief to me. Yes, Mims is a superstar. I think our run game is really, really good. I'm glad to see Eric Gray being the main guy. And then Major obviously had some big carries. Offensive line, I think, it's hard to tell through these two games. And while Nebraska is not very good, we'll at least get a little bit of a better gauge, I think, of our offensive line. But defensively, and slow start the other night, I'm just glad with what we got in the second half. And defensively, I'll take giving up 3 points. I'm good with that. It was interesting. I don't know if you saw this. You mentioned Union. Did you see that Kent State practiced at Union all week? Like, they didn't go home after they were in Seattle, which I thought was an interesting.
2 weeks away from home.
Yeah, my mom called me and said that she saw them at a hotel in downtown Tulsa. She was like, "Why are they here? Is the game in Tulsa?" I said, "No, Mom, it's not. It's in Norman. They were practicing at Union all week."
Yeah, but it's smart because you don't want to go back 3 hours and then come back 2 hours, or go back 3 and then come back 1 or whatever. Yeah, so my time zones are a mess.
Yeah,
but yeah. So, anyways, my point on that is, I think Kent State came in prepared. There's some teams in the MAC that aren't necessarily bad teams. So you don't want to look at it and say, slow start, we're in trouble by any stretch. Take what we saw in the second half and be happy with it, I think.
Kent State made a bowl game last year. Yeah. Kent State's they've got talent in their conference, and same thing with UTEP game 1. These are competitive teams, and I thought they were good challenges for what OU had, 2 weeks into the era.
No doubt. I totally agree with that. And then, Saturday, it will be not a toss-up. It'll be a toss-up in terms of what we see from Nebraska. Again, a team with, I think, more talent than they've indicated. And sometimes when a coach gets let go, you don't know what you're going to see from that team, because I know Mickey Joseph is very popular there. It's a proud program. It's one that I covered for 2 years. The last 2 years, they were any good. Played for an national championship, had a Heisman Trophy winner in Eric Crouch. I kind of fell in love with that program, and I still really admire it. And I hate to see where it is right now. But I think we're going to get a different team. They tested us last year, and I think I would expect the same this year. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park up there.
So you just mentioned that you obviously worked in Nebraska in the past. You saw them when they were pretty much at their peak. Mm-hmm. What is it about this rivalry? We saw how special it was last year with the anniversary of the game of the century and stuff like that. But we heard Brent Venables this week talk about it, and he got emotional, talking about the Red October game that they tore the goalpost down in Norman. What's so special about this rivalry that we don't really get to see anymore?
Yeah, well, obviously when they were all playing for, every game was for an Orange Bowl berth and typically a national championship berth, this Big 8 champs, that was special. That was also probably before your guys' time. Even in the Big 12, Nebraska was starting its slide. They played for the championship in 01. Crouch won the Heisman in 01. And then after that, it was really it. They fired Solich shortly thereafter, and everything kind of got hazy and fuzzy for them. But the beauty of it is, and having lived up there and having so many friends that I made up there, they're like us. The Nebraskans and Oklahomans are very similar. And I think that that's why, the pride they take in their state, the pride they take in their football program, what it means to them on a daily basis, far from just Saturdays, but really every day of the week. It's important how they do. It's important that they support them. It's important that they represent them as a people. And I think that's why you get, it's not OU Texas and it's not Bedlam. It's not a rivalry of disdain or hatred. It's a rivalry of real respect. You're going to see it Saturday. Hopefully they'll show it on Fox. But, when OU takes the field, I guarantee you they're going to cheer. I guarantee you, like in 01, the year Nebraska beat us 20-10 after we beat them in 2000. And Eric Crouch had the Heisman moment with the touchdown catch down the sideline. At halftime, I think the game was 10-10. And I stood in that stadium and watched OU leave in that end zone to a standing ovation from Nebraska fans. That's who they are. That's what they are. I'll admit it. They're my favorite fan base in America. And I think that we're going to see them. It's a real rivalry of respect. We miss them. They miss us. And I don't think, regardless of where we are as programs and how different we are in the position we're in right now, I don't think that we're going to see the lack of respect that we've always seen respect. I don't expect it to change.
Yeah, you talking about that, I'm trying to think about the timeline there. And it seems to me like the move to the Big Ten was sort of a grasp for desperation by Nebraska. Hey, let's get back to our heights.
Biggest mistake.
Do you think that was wrong? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
From a financial standpoint, it was right. From a respectability and relevance standpoint in football, it was a nightmare situation. It was a terrible decision. I think any of them up there would tell you the same thing. What it did was it took them away from being able to recruit Texas. They recruited Texas really, really well. And when they left and they had no reason to ever visit the state of Texas again, that recruiting dried up. Now where are they going to recruit? Nebraska's not talent rich. The Dakotas are not talent rich. Iowa's not talent rich. Kansas is not talent rich. Ohio gets Ohio. Penn State gets Pennsylvania. Michigan gets a little bit of both. Wisconsin gets a little bit of both. There's nothing left for them. They don't recruit Florida anymore. They can't recruit California anymore. And once they lost Texas, that ended it for them. They don't have a recruiting base, which is why, as much as I love the fan base there, I've always said they're one of the most regional in the country. And I say that, and I'm not trying to be cruel, but because you won championships in 94, 95, and 97 doesn't mean that you're entitled to them now. They're a program that left a conference they could win, that left a conference they could recruit well in, and went to one that they can't. And I don't see them ever getting back to where they are. Sure, can they be Wisconsin someday? Yeah, I think they can be Wisconsin. I think they can win the West, get beaten in the Big Ten championship game, and maybe some year in a 12-team playoff they can squeeze their way in because of a really good regular season. But they're a ways away from that. But to think we can win a national championship or back-to-back championships or get back to where we were in the 90s is not realistic for them.
You made a good point about Nebraska switching conferences. Now, me and Mark were talking about, we want to get your thoughts on OU moving conferences, joining the SEC, a conference that you cover. Mm-hmm. What this OU program is about, especially now with Brent Venables. What does OU need to improve upon the most to survive in the SEC and not turn into a Nebraska?
Well, I mean, first of all, like facility-wise, I think we're in good shape. But the arms race in this league is unlike anything else. So they're going to have to be willing to spend and continue to spend. It's going to take booster money, donor money. It's going to take what you can't fall behind in terms of facilities. That's just a lock. We know that. I love what we've done. I love the South End Zone. It's obviously a special place down there right now. We also cannot skimp on salaries. We can't skimp on assistant salaries. And I'm not saying that we do. What it takes to win in this league, that's what it's going to take to win in this league. Where Venables is the right choice is because we're already seeing an impact in recruiting on the lines of scrimmage. This is why Alabama blew us out. This is why LSU blew us out, in addition to guys being suspended for idiot reasons. This is ultimately why we didn't beat Georgia in Pasadena. This is why we don't compete with those schools in the playoff. Clemson too. Clemson's built like an SEC team, and they've knocked us out of the playoff a couple of times. It's because up front, we're not where we need to be. And that's changing with Brent. It's going to have to continue to change. Like, You don't win if you can't get the 320-pound nose tackle out of Mississippi, if you can't get the 330-pound offensive tackles from South Georgia, from Louisiana. We got to get those dudes. And Brent's recruited those guys in his tenure at Clemson. He's going to continue to do that. Once we enter the league and have that up front, in addition to the skill guys that I know we have and we're getting, we'll be fine. But we get whipped up front in the biggest games of our, of the last 10 years. That'll happen almost every week in the SEC if we don't continue to hammer home the lines of scrimmage.
I think you look at every one of our playoff losses has come against an SEC team or Clemson. And so we went and grabbed Brent Venables from the Southeast in Clemson, Todd Bates as the defensive line coach, best recruiter of defensive linemen there's been the last 5 years. He develops these guys too. And you're already seeing those relationships develop in the Southeast that, I mean, it's a pipeline that OU has not had.
No, and Jeff Levy too. I mean, just from Ole Miss, but also UCF before that, he's going to get some guys out of Florida, especially now that we will play in Florida and in Georgia and in Auburn and Alabama, places these families can easily get up and watch. So no, and he knew what he was doing. Like, there's no question from the time this decision was made. I mean, trust me, I have the same feelings for Lincoln as almost everybody else. I don't know if it's him or Kevin Durant that's higher on the list, but they're both there. But Brent will, without a doubt, have us more ready for this change than Lincoln would have. We were not recruiting any better on the defensive side. We were not recruiting any better on the lines of scrimmage. We were quarterbacks and receivers heavy. That's great in the Big 12. It is not great here. It is not okay in the SEC. And like, that's something that, Lane Kiffin won 10 games last year with that, but it's not good enough. You're not going to beat Alabama. You're not going to beat LSU on a regular basis in A&M if you don't have what he needs to have. And it's going to be the same with OU. I've told people, look, get ready for, you're going to scream and cry and kick every time you see OU go 8-4 or 9-3. But in this league, there's going to be a lot more 8-4s and 9-3s than there will be 11-1s and 12-1s. Like, that's just the way it is. That's the way with everybody not named Alabama and maybe Georgia. And we're not going to walk into this league and all of a sudden take it by storm and in my opinion, play for a conference championship in the first 2-3 years. It'll take a little time. This is a different beast, man. And it's week in and week. You don't get Iowa State on the schedule, the typical Iowa State. You don't get Kansas on the schedule. You don't get Texas Tech on the schedule. Like, you get Vanderbilt on the schedule. And after that, like, you walk into Columbia, South Carolina thinking you should win. That place is insane. Every atmosphere in this league outside of Nashville is phenomenal. So it's a different ball game, man. Like, and I think that's just what people need to understand.
Let's talk a little bit about the SEC. We saw Alabama go into Austin last weekend, and I don't know what they were doing. And then you see Georgia dominate so far this season. They're the new number one. Those are obviously the two top teams in the SEC. Who's your third team? Because we've seen Arkansas perform super well. We've seen Tennessee play well. What do you think?
Yeah,
this is just Mason wanting you to say Arkansas.
It kind of is.
That's what this is.
My number 3, and I've been on record, to me, it is Arkansas. And I'm not even saying that for any reason other than I thought it was before the season. I've got no reason to think otherwise. KJ Jefferson is a legit quarterback. He may be the second best quarterback in this league. I'm not saying he's an NFL caliber guy right now, but he may be the second best. To win a game, I think I'd take him over Levis. I know I'd take him over Anthony Richardson. Stetson Bennett, I don't know if I'd take him over him, but and obviously Bryce is Bryce.
Yeah.
But I think it's Arkansas. But they got a nasty schedule. I love the emphatic win against South Carolina, who's a team that's probably a little more talented than they look to be. But I think Tennessee's really good. I think Kentucky's really, really good too. And, the game to watch for is November 19th when Georgia goes to Lexington, because even if Kentucky has a league loss, they would win the tiebreak if they could beat Georgia in Lexington. And that place is going to be out of its mind. But on the whole, I think Arkansas is the second best team. It's just the schedule at the end of the season Kentucky may have 10 or 11 wins. Tennessee may have 10 wins. Arkansas may have 9 because that schedule is just nasty.
I'm not as big of an SEC guy, but how disappointing is it that Spencer Rattler continues to Spencer Rattle in big games?
Yeah, his offensive line is awful. And like, if you look at them, they're like 13th in the league in running the football. They can't block for the run. They can't protect the dude. He's running for his life. He doesn't have a clear number one outlet. They don't have they don't have the tight ends he got to, find in Norman, or the fullback out of the flat. Like, it's a different, like, he's finding out that, like, Spencer Rattler isn't going to be successful just because he's Spencer Rattler. Like, he doesn't have it around him right now. And I think it's going to continue to be a rough year for him. Do
you think that everybody wants to find a way to say that Nick Saban's done? It's kind of like the Tom Brady thing. You always want to find that way to give yourself a little bit of hope if you're an opposing fan base. I follow a lot of like Georgia people on Twitter after working in Macon for 2 years. Yeah. They firmly are starting to believe that it's their league and Alabama's time is numbered. Do you buy that?
No, not really, because Georgia fans don't want to hear people say that I don't think Georgia wins the title last year if Jamison Williams doesn't get hurt. I mean, that was an absolute game changer. Or if John Mechie hadn't gotten hurt in the championship game, SEC championship game. I don't. I think there's room for both. And I think that's what we have. Now, this year, from what I've seen, I absolutely would have had Georgia number 1. Because Alabama, one, they don't play as well on the road as they used to. 15 penalties better have been an aberration, because if they're that undisciplined, and a lot of them were just idiot, well after the whistle blew, frustration type of fouls, that can't continue. Offensive line doesn't look like one that is championship worthy. And frankly, think over the years, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Jamison Williams, John Mechie, like they've always had Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, like they've always had guys that are just flat out burners that can get behind the defense. Watch for the return in the next week or two of a guy by the name of Tyler Harrell, who is a transfer from Louisville. He'll be the fastest guy on the field. He's a 29-yard-a-catch guy from last year from Louisville. That's what they need, because right now they don't have that game breaker at wide receiver. And if Harrell isn't that answer, then I think Alabama could lose a game or two this year. But I would expect them to be fine. I wouldn't turn the page on them yet. And Georgia fans are eager to do that. I think there's room for both of them. It might be a 1A and a 1B, but it's not a 1 Georgia, 2 Alabama clearly right now.
We'll get you out of here on this little something fun. I know you're a big Dodgers guy. Your Dodgers got a chance at the World Series this year. Is it them and everybody else? Or do you think they got to worry about the Braves in the NL East, or even the Mets?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's them and everybody else. I mean, I remember 1988 like it was yesterday, and then I remember that it took until 2020 in a COVID year to win it again. Like, nothing's a given. I mean, they were the best team in the league a few times in that stretch and didn't get it done. So, injuries are always a concern. Pitching staff's got a little bit beat up. Lineup is tremendous, but I absolutely, man, I wouldn't rule out the Mets. I wouldn't rule out the Braves. I wouldn't rule out the Yankees if LA gets back to the World Series. So, no, I don't think it's really them and everybody else, but they certainly, like, it would be considered, I think, a disappointment if they didn't win it, but it's certainly not out of the question.
Perfect. Dari, thank you so much for spending some time with us, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. It was fun, guys. Good to talk to you all.